Just a reminder as to what will bring you that kind of stability you're looking for internally, your chemistry. It's the four pillars of stability. It's the four pillars of happiness. It's so boring. It's so lame. It's just so predictable, but yet it's so hard. It's so tremendously, absurdly hard. And also because there's caveats and there's conditions to each one of the pillars: sleep, nourishment, physical activity, healthy conversation. Let's focus on healthy conversations for a second. Each pillar lends itself to the other pillar, right? If you get your sleep, your conversations will be better with yourself and with others. If you get your nourishment, your conversations will be better. When it comes to healthy conversations, that can lend itself to getting your sleep. That can lend itself to you working out more. It's the way we talk with ourselves and with each other. It's the way that we say things. We really don't give much weight to questions, to asking ourselves, like, am I doing everything that I possibly could be doing? Because we don't want the answer. I even find with myself constantly, still, for years and years, no matter how good I'm doing, when I hit that skid, when my momentum is thrown off, it is very difficult for me to admit to myself that I am not doing everything that I should be doing. When I reach this place of like discombobulation and my health is not optimal, my perception is not optimal, my clarity is not optimal, it's so interesting that it's still difficult, very difficult to admit that I'm not doing everything right. Because I noticed, and one of those reasons, and let's talk about that. One of those reasons is because we are all very spoiled. We're all very susceptible to being spoiled. And I'll speak for myself. I'm very susceptible to being spoiled. I get in this state of like just profound comfortability, and it feels so good to be lazy. It feels so good to not challenge my mind and my body. It feels so good to do the bare minimum. And then you rationalize it and justify it by saying, well, this is good. And I think there are times when you should just sort of like veg out, let's say. And this is why everything, there's caveats to everything and it's more complex. I do think also there's times when you shouldn't indulge in surplus. I think I have a theory about why, you know getting shit faced on the weekend, let's say. Let's talk about that. I'm gonna be all over the place because I'm a tangential kind of human being, and everything connects to everything. I used to look in the past, when I used to see people get shit faced all the time on the weekend, or many people, I would look at it as I'd be judgmental about it, and I think it was just pure escapism, right? However, I do think that when it's not as a means to escape, I think often there is a legitimate sort of like intuitive reason to work hard, play hard. It's to hit that reset. I get it. After like working, after seeing how a kind of like rigidity sets in and a sort of like stagnation sets in internally from working really, really hard. Um, that's because my lazy ass in the past, years ago, I'm talking about like many years ago, I didn't appreciate that you needed to offset the hard work with a kind of hard play. Now, one thing I will challenge people on when they get, so what I'm saying is that getting shit faced oftentimes is a means to hit that reset. I do believe that we need an internal reset. I do believe that engaging in some kind of form of heightened stimulation, whether it's a combination or singularly caloric stimulation, sexual stimulation, just chemical stimulations of all kind, social stimulations. I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at getting drunk off of stimulation. But what I would argue is that people do not know how to rejuvenate themselves. And then I will say that when we're talking about the reset, what we're talking about is rejuvenation. It's a form of rejuvenation. Is ideal. And I would argue that there are healthier forms of drunkenness, so to speak. I'm not talking about alcohol. When I say drunkenness in this context, I'm not talking about purely just drinking liquor. I'm talking about there's healthier forms of indulgence and debauchery. And when I say there's healthier forms, I mean when there is a way to go about it, and I don't think there's a one size fits all way, but there's a way to go about it which increases the probability that the inflammatory response the following day will be minimalized. And I believe that you can also engage in a kind of indulgence where you even feel better the next day and not shittier. And that's to each his own. Some people are willing to deal with all the negative consequences of like getting shit faced and but I would argue that long term you don't want that inflammatory response to be what it is, to be so climactic, to be so consequential, because then it has long term effects when you're just engaged in your normal everyday and you're hurting as a result of it. I think there's a form of rejuvenation that we can pursue where you're better, where you're even better. And that involves incorporating something as simple as this. I used to say this all the time, and now it's just I find it so interesting that this has been cleared up for me, and that this is one thing I was wrong about. It's just so amazing to me how wrong I was about this. I used to say that in my early 20s, I used to say I was addicted to sweets to such an extent that I would eat a pan of cookies and I would get sick. I'd come home from work, like when I was like 22, 21 years old, and I would go to the Safeway that was right next to my apartment. I'd get some Pillsbury cookies. I'd bake a pan of those Pillsbury cookies and I'd eat the entire pan. And I would literally get sick, like literally. Like, what do I mean by sick? Because people have asked me this question. What I mean by sick is inflammation, congestion, feverishness, just an all around sickly feeling. And for the longest time, I thought it was just, I was getting sick because it was my indulgence in sweets. I thought it was just a kind of matter of fact consequence that if I ate an entire pan of cookies, it's gonna make me sick. Nobody else I know personally is eating an entire pan of cookies the way that I am. What I realized is it wasn't even the cookies. It was the wheat. It was the wheat. I just ordered some fantastic gluten-free cookies the other day. I ordered 6 of them. And I ate them all in the span of basically a day. Usually I eat them all in a day. And they're like magnificent. It was from this place called Milk Mustache. Delicious cookies. Delicious gluten-free cookies. Although eating all those cookies might make me feel uncomfortably full, although eating those gluten-free cookies might mess me up in some other ways, it doesn't make me sick. It doesn't make me sick. So it's not that me indulging in eating 6, 7, even like no matter how many cookies I eat is going to make me sick. It was the wheat. My point in utilizing that example is we have to keep in mind there's these variables that we take for granted. For the longest time, I took that wheat flour variable for granted. And even now, when I talk about wheat flour, it doesn't register in people's brains. When I mention wheat, people just are like, what? But you have to see the merit in that any specific substance can affect you. There's some people who eat asparagus and they will wreck their internal environment. There's some people you can eat, obviously one of the most well-known is, peanut allergies. But, it's just, there's so many factors that come into play. So my point is this, if you're an alcohol drinker, I avoid liquor. I'm not mad at it if you indulge liquor, because liquor doesn't agree with me either. But I will say this, liquor derived from grapes had affected me much less harmfully than whiskeys. I remember like years ago when I would dabble with alcohol, I romanticized whiskey and I was like, I want to get some whiskey, and I would drink it and it would taste nice, but it always leave me feeling like total crap. And I wouldn't even drink a lot at all. But then I drink something that was derived from grapes and it would be a completely different kind of experience. I really think we should be more aware of every little ingredient we're consuming, not so that we can't indulge. I still eat sweets. I'm still eating my cookies. It's not about not eating cookies. It's not about even not drinking liquor, but you might be better off drinking sake. You might be better off drinking mead. You might be better off, you know what I'm saying? There's just so many. You might be better off drinking wine. And then if you do drink wine, you might be better off drinking wine that doesn't have sulfates in it. There's just so many different factors that we don't want to believe affect us. So I wanted to emphasize the healthy conversation portion of the 4 pillars of stability, but this is the conversation. This is it. You will not sort of unveil and figure out what affects you positively and negatively unless you're having this conversation. And it takes questions. It takes sort of being open to the fact that maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's just one little thing that I'm ingesting that I shouldn't be. I would argue that something like ice cream can throw your system off way more than any candy or any dessert you consume. Or maybe not. But it's worth going through the trial and error of trying to figure out this specificity of how your body reacts. And so my point is, again, going back to the pillars: sleep, diet, physical activity, healthy conversation. And I guess what I'm trying to like really say in this tangential way is that all these pillars connect to each other. Like they connect to each other whether we like it or not. So the pillar of diet and healthy conversation, the reason why they connect is because it takes conversation to figure out your appropriate diet. It takes a conversation to figure out what you should be doing in regards to the trial and error of what you're consuming. It takes a conversation to challenge yourself on your sleep. It takes a conversation to challenge yourself on doing more physically. It takes a conversation to snap yourself out of these things. It takes an honest, vulnerable, transparent, uncomfortable conversation. All these pillars lend themselves to the other. I'm not just trying to find some catchy way of describing something. It just is what it is. They're all connected whether we like it or not. Bless you.